this can't be a thing where every 7 years I'm in crisis and then I figure out a way to deal with the crisis, right? I started in 1996 and there was no one who looked like me doing what I was doing, right? Now in 2024, we have this amazing technology, right, that allows us to find what we're looking for in a way that didn't exist for so much of my career. I started in 1996. We didn't even know who Mark Zuckerberg was then, right? So there was not a frame of understanding this weird, right? Like people would apologize to my parents and say, I'm so sorry, Tina is so smart, she could have been a doctor or a lawyer. It was being in community that really saved me so many times as a founder, finding friends. I even got it rejected at first by my publisher, Harper, and they thought it was too complicated.
You are listening to My Rejection Story, hosted by Alice Draper. Hello and welcome to another episode of My Rejection Story. I'm so excited to be joined by Tina Wells today. Tina is an entrepreneur, a best-selling author, speaker, and brand builder who believes that work-life harmony is the key to elevating your life. She's all about straight talk, strong drinks, short emails, and helping you find your superpower. She is not about comparisons, band-aid fixes, bullshit, the word moist, or that hustle game. I'm so excited for today's conversation and particularly to dive into some of what Tina writes in her best-selling book, The Elevation Approach. So my first question for you, Tina, is can you tell me about a time in your life where you felt rejected?
Oh gosh, Alice. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I have to make an update to my intro. I used to be all about strong drinks. I feel like now in my mid-40s, I'm all about really delicious mocktails. So things change.
Sober era.
Here we are, right? And so this is such a good question to start with, right? Right, the beginning of my rejection story. And I feel like for me, that was 5 years ago when I realized that agency world was changing. I had successfully run my own marketing agency since I was 16 years old. So it's 24 years of a career. And I realized that I was kind of being rejected in a way of like, oh, the agency world is changing and I'm either going to get with the changes or I'm going to have to do something different. And it was partially an industry rejection in my mind and partially me rejecting the change, right? And really having to sit with myself. And this was we're going to sum it up in 2 words, but for the listener, I want them to know this was almost a year of me going through this rejection, really deeply feeling it, going through what I consider to be my first bout of depression, right? And really understanding like there was a massive change coming to my life. And so I just realized like when I think about the word rejection, right? Sometimes it's this idea that it's just not a fit. And what I realized was something that had fit perfectly, or at least felt that way for 24 years, was no longer a fit in my life. And I didn't know what was coming. I had only known what had been. And I just really sat, I think, in that year, 2019, in like a deep place of rejection.
Mm-hmm. Your agency, I'm sure, was something you'd put so much into. So I think it's probably very hard to kind of rationalize that and reflect to know that this change is needed because it's not like you're decided, oh, I don't want to become a doctor or I don't want to buy this house or something. It's something that you played a very active role in building. So what I want to know is what did it take for you to actually realize this? Because I'm sure you didn't straight away know that this is the next step.
No, if you've read my book, The Elevation Approach, there's so many different exercises and tools in the book, but they all ask you to really become very present with yourself, to ask yourself those really tough questions. And what I realized is I was moving so fast, and I think so many of us do the same thing, right? We're on an express train, we're on the treadmill, we're on the hamster wheel, that to really get to the answers you're even asking about, you have to step off. And I think that was my first step, was just to say, stop, pause. How am I feeling? How does this feel? Where am I feeling it in my body? Am I trying to rationalize something that no longer makes sense, right? But the first step to even starting to contemplate any of this was just stop, right? And so I really had to take a pause. And I think it's really hard for us to take a pause. I don't think that life always allows us a pause, but I think what we all know is we get to a place we call burnout. If we don't pause before that, right, then we eventually just run out of steam. And so I was in that place of completely like I was out of energy. So it was like a pause that wasn't as intentional as I feel I take pauses now. I'm very intentional about when I need to pause, but then I was not. And I feel like it just was almost like a crisis where I was forced into it.
Is this when you got that seven-figure contract to the big corporate clients and then your hair started falling out? You describe yourself as crawling to the finish line, which is so visual.
That was about 7 years prior, right? When I really felt like I'd come to the mountaintop. And so, I talk in the book about different points of burnout, right? So, first starting at 16, I think my first burnout was around 27, right? When I went on my first proper vacation and my laptop wasn't invited. That story is in the book. And then what I really realized was I went into a management program, personal management, right, where I could manage the stress, but I really wasn't dealing with it. I was like band-aiding it. And so when you look at that stretch, I was really building my business from 27 to 32. And that, at 32 was that big seven-figure client. And boy, I thought I had managed my stress. And I realized in that moment I hadn't. And isn't it fascinating, right, that it's another 7-year stretch. And then the big one hits, right? So I do very much believe in cycles, and I believe in the cyclical nature of things. And, also the older we get, I think when we're younger, we can take the hits a bit easier, right? But as you're, so think about that for me at 39, like if I had that hit again at 46, it's going to hurt more, right? I'm not going to bounce back the way I bounced back in my 20s, at 27 or 32. And so I was also realizing, oh, okay, I need another way. And that's really, when I started writing the elevation approach, because I was like, oh, this can't be a thing where every 7 years I'm in crisis and then I figure out a way to deal with the crisis, right? I need a way to constantly be asking myself these questions. So it's not like when I'm in crisis that I then for the first time say, am I happy? Am I doing the thing I should be doing, right? We don't want to always have to crisis manage our lives and our careers.
Yeah, I love that so much. And in the elevation approach, you advocate for work-life harmony over work-life balance. For listeners who have never picked up a copy of the elevation approach, could you briefly tell them just a brief synopsis? I know there's a 4-step protocol, which I'm going to dive into, but just kind of briefly, who's the book for?
Yes. So let's first talk about why am I talking about work-life harmony over balance? So in my burnout, what I realized was I was trying to get into balance. And in the periods of my life where I was doing a ton of work, I was then adding a ton of play. And if you think about a scale, think about putting a ton of work on the scale, and then to balance it out, you're putting a ton of play. Well, what if I don't want to just keep adding and adding and adding, right?
Yeah.
Harmony, the concept of work-life harmony is imagine your life is a dinner plate. And on that plate are all of the things that you love, right? The perfect meal that works together. When you add a flavor and the flavor doesn't work. Right? It doesn't mean that your plate is full of veggies and full of right? Your plate might have a big old piece of protein and smaller, right? But it works for you. And that's really the heart of the elevation approach is harmony. It means that there are seasons where you're going to be doing a lot of work and you may not be able to add as much play, right? But you add that little sweet something that just completes the meal, right? So it doesn't mean that because you have half your plate full of veggies, the other half is going to be a big piece of cheesecake, right? Like that doesn't make sense. Harmony is about how do the things in our life work together? And so I really felt like we need to ask a different question. And then as I love a framework and I need to really channel my thoughts in the way I can constantly be creating. Like I designed a framework that really works for me. And so what I realized is, so there are 4 steps: preparation, inspiration, recreation, and transformation. So I realized I was stuck in a cycle of preparation, right, which is all the stuff we do to get going on a big project or idea. Inspiration, socializing that, getting people to help us. And then I go back to preparation. So I was in this weird cycle of preparing, getting excited with other people, preparing, but I was never doing the thing. And so what I was missing was recreation. And recreation is important because it is an intentional pause, right, of work. And it just lets things settle. I found that when I take a proper recreation, ideas come to me or solutions come to me that I never even thought of, right? And they seem to appear out of nowhere. Literally, where you're like, finish a stretching class or finish yoga or finish a walk, and you go back and you're like, oh, here's a fresh perspective, right? And then what was possible was transformation. My ideas started hitting, right? I was able to, so think about the example you gave from 2012 where I got so burnt out with a 7-figure project, right? Fast forward to my launches at Target, I launched 2 7-figure brands within the same year and I didn't burn out, right? Because I had learned how to manage a flow and I could anticipate and say, okay, I'm going into a season where a lot is going to be required of me. What do I need, right? So pre-scheduling dinner with friends, family vacation, I knew how to manage that, right? Because I knew what was coming. And that's the elevation approach. It's not saying, stop working so hard, right? It's saying we all want to do work we love. And I think sometimes one of the things I realized is many people do love the jobs and careers they have, right? And we can also burn out from things we love. We're not just burnt out because our job is taxing, we don't really like our job. We can be burnt out because we're so excited about what we're doing. And so this is just a method to help you manage that.
I love it so much, and I think that it is very different to what a lot of the mainstream advice is. And something I want to touch on is also kind of there's a lot of stuff, I guess, in the wellness space that's quite anti-hustle culture. So it'll be like, you shouldn't hustle. And I think it comes from a very good place because of like this very, capitalist driven society where we always feel like we have to be on the move. But in turn, the message can be, don't work too hard. If you're working too hard, something is wrong. Like if you are on your laptop until nighttime, something's wrong. But in so many of my conversations with very great, successful, interesting people, it's been those periods of working really hard that have helped them make a seismic shift in a very positive way in their life, whether it was starting their business or getting the book out or whatever it is. So I love that you talk about, this period of recreation, the period of transformation, that it doesn't all need to be happening at once. What I'm also, and I want to ask you about, is that I think that the recreation aspect is hard for many of us because we feel like we're like, something's wrong. Why am I not being productive? Why am I not bringing in stuff to society? So when you talk about recreation, do you talk about taking extended holidays, or are you talking about implementing it into your day-to-day life? What does that look like?
Yeah, so in full disclosure, it is the hardest thing for me too. I have come to really love it. I had to test it out myself, and when I saw the effects in my own career, that's when it became something that I absolutely 100% had to do. And so in the book, I give many different exercises and activities and ways you can get yourself into recreation, but I want to just say it starts with 15 minutes. Right? I certainly don't expect, if you're new to my work or new to the book, that you jump in wholeheartedly and plan a big vacation. I wouldn't even suggest that, because you want to make sure that you're managing recreation properly, right? And so start with 15 minutes at 3 o'clock, right? Or whatever midday looks like for you, doing something completely not related to work. Even if it's like scrolling X, even if it's like 15 minutes with your favorite gossip magazine, like just do something that brings you pure joy for 15 minutes and that is not connected to work, and measure how you feel and measure your productivity, right? Did you complete those things on your list? All of that. There was a part of my career when I was doing a lot of business with Asia. So I had to figure out a way to sustain my energy from like 8 a.m. in the morning to at least 9 or 10 p.m. at night, right? And that recreation break, I would take about an hour. Sometimes I got up to an hour and a half. It really fueled me. And in the second part of my day, when I needed to also, sustain sometimes a 2-hour Zoom meeting with partners in Asia. And so I think you build that muscle. Recreation is a muscle you're going to start to learn about. You're going to learn how to build that muscle. And then once you do it, you're going to work up to, I just came back from 2 weeks in a holiday, and I was doing like medical testing and all kinds of things that were really, really rejuvenating. But no way would I have been prepared to do something like that years ago. It just wouldn't have been, I wouldn't have been comfortable. I would have been stressed. It would have been counterproductive. And so what's great about recreation is you can just test it and you can start to figure out what works for you, how to incorporate it, and what you like to do. It could be cooking. There are just like so many things, and final example I'll give, and I give this in the book, is I say, like, watch how children play and just watch how committed they are to playing. It's just fun. It's joyful, right? They're in it. They're fully present in their play. And I think that that's just a great example for us.
Yeah, yeah. Trying to connect with that inner child.
Yeah.
As you were talking about it, it makes me think. I don't know if you've been seeing this, but I've been seeing a lot of like reels and TikToks where people talk about creating I think it's a dopamine menu. So like throughout the day, you do things that just bring you joy, whether it's like cooking that nice meal or making that really nice fancy coffee, or sitting in the sun with your coffee. And some of the TikToks were like, this is what I do to stop myself from doom scrolling. So what I wanted to ask you about is that I think that I've noticed with myself, and I think many people probably can relate, is that those breaks can be energizing or depleting depending on what I do. If I sit and scroll TikTok, I don't feel energized. I feel like, I didn't step away from the screen. But if I go and walk on the treadmill while reading a book, I feel like kind of a lot more kind of recalibrated and set for the next part of the day. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, like what those sorts of things that you do.
It's, I am a media person, right? A media marketing and pop culture has really been my career, and it's something I enjoy immensely. I'm also like a self-proclaimed product junkie. And so I spent several years making my own products, at big retail. I'm always going to be surprised and delighted by a new product. And I really love female founded brands. I love BIPOC founded brands. And so what really kind of excites me is when, like yesterday, I was just boarding a flight from Madrid and happened to be reading. I love my iPad Pro. I'm always reading the news today. Stumbled on Vogue, stumbled on a female designer I'd never heard of. And it's just like the excitement of like seeing her pieces and seeing the creativity. And I'd read a story about her travels in Europe. And I'm like, first of all, I love reading stories about people traveling. I love to travel. So I love to read about what people do when they travel, their habits, all that. It's super interesting to me. And then I stumbled on her brand. And that to me, I was like so happy. It fueled my day, right? But it was so many different themes that I think are important to me, right? Seeing the expression of someone else's creativity really does fuel me. Seeing the beautiful end result of that product and their creative process is exciting. Being able to choose to invest, right, my money, and I always say it's important to spend your values, right? So if I make a purchase that I feel like is aligned with my personal values, that feels really good, and I think when you think about kind of the doom scrolling culture, sometimes it gets you in this place. If you're looking at something, you're buying things, it's so out of alignment. I think we don't even stop and think about why does this not have the payoff we think it's going to have, right? Because in a way, we're sometimes consuming things that just aren't aligned with how we actually want to participate, right? And it almost feels like, I don't know, like we don't have a choice, right? We just get stuck in this thing, right? And so I think whatever you choose to do something that's aligned with your values, right? If you want to be outside more, get outside, get 15 minutes of fresh air. So you're right. I think there are activities we can do that really either bring us more agency, like energy and refuel us, or they kind of deplete us even more.
Yeah, I love that so much. Get in touch with your values, know what the thing is. And I think that the thing that fuels us can sometimes take a little bit more work than the thing
Yes.
that doesn't fuel us. It's very automatic to just start scrolling, whereas going outside may mean, going outside. um,
I
but
can scroll at this point, and if something is feeling like no, up, right,
yeah,
and then I get to like
time to
the
red
woman
flag.
who's like doing her medical tourism. That is a really fun thing to watch on TikTok, or female
Yeah.
founders who I'm actually working with TikTok right now as a mentor and a coach to 15 female founders who are part of their SOAR program. And these are women who built businesses on TikTok who hadn't really grown businesses before. And this tool has just allowed them to do something really special. And so that's exciting, right? So every
Yeah.
tool can have good and bad. It's just really figuring out, how is this in service to what I need right now?
Yeah, I think I've learned so much through TikTok. So, like, definitely, I think
Me
there's some huge,
too.
huge upsides. I think it's just about being intentional. So, the inspiration part of your book is also very interesting to me because I'm very much a like see it to be it person. I find that I rarely kind of do my best work when there's people around me who I'm hugely inspired by. And so it's quite important to me to try and find those people in work. Um, and something I was thinking about as I was reading that is I grew up in post-apartheid South Africa. So a lot of my friends who are black talked about how they didn't see people who looked like them who were teachers or doctors or in like professions that they wanted to be. So that came with challenges, whether it was kind of assimilating to whiteness, but also like a lot of imposter syndrome and entering that space. So what I wanted to know from you is, I guess it's two questions. I'll start with the first, which is for anyone who's struggling to find people who inspire them. Like, do you have any advice there? And kind of, because I think that that is also part of like self-rejecting. It's very easy to self-reject when we don't see people who look like us or come from the same background or whatever doing the things we want to do because you'll say, well, you know, XYZ, people like me can't do XYZ.
Yeah, so first, I started in 1996 and there was no one who looked like me doing what I was doing, right? I came from a really supportive background. I'm the oldest of six children. My parents were incredibly supportive, and I think their support and that kind of family platform really helped me early on know I could do whatever I wanted to do before I even saw that reflected to me. But what I did see were like films, TV, where they were like I got to see Black people in business, and so I would say now in 2024, we have this amazing technology, right, that allows us to find what we're looking for in a way that didn't exist for so much of my career. And I think that it's all about being intentional and just searching for it, right? So you may not see it reflected in your culture, but I don't know. I feel like things have changed so much where intentionally looking is important, but first it's the idea of this is what I want to do, right? So whether you're religious or spiritual, it's saying like, this is who I want to become, show me, guide me, right? And they always say, the saying, when the student is ready, the teacher appears, right? And so I love that saying because it's just a great reminder of like, when you're ready, ask for the guidance that you need, right? And it'll miraculously show up. But it's so like the way we live in this very interconnected world, we're literally at our fingertips, right? We're a search engine search away from finding the thing we need. That to me is what's most exciting about the time we live in, right? That there are solutions available. And I remember in business that, parts of my life where that was not the case, right? I mean, this is going way back, guys, like 25 years back, but like there was a time when you couldn't update your own website, right? Where you needed to invest in something called a content management system. And for someone to build that system is minimally like $25,000, right? It was really almost impossible to update your own website, right? There was a barrier. Now, there are places that make it so easy to start your own website and start your own business. And so, I'm always grateful for that. I'm grateful for that evolution and how we're moving to a place where more information is really available to us. And so it's really, I think, having a process to access the information that is available, right? So it's the removing the idea that something's not possible is super important.
Do you know that I give away a copy of every author who comes on the show's book? All you have to do to enter is subscribe to the podcast, review it, send me a screenshot at media@hustlingwriters.com and tell me which book you're answering for. And I might just be mailing you a copy of the book, but also you're helping me grow a show that I am so passionate about, so delusional about. I wanted to be on Times Square. I want to be interviewing the biggest and best authors, and I need all the help I can to get there. Your subscribe means the world. Your review means the world. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And let's resume with the episode. Yeah, This is fantastic. So removing that idea, from what you said, I kind of pick up two main themes, which is one, I think community is very important, and you mentioned you had a very supportive family structure. I know not everyone has that, but I think finding that supportive community is like the cornerstone. And then the other being that you need to be really intentional about looking for it and knowing what you're looking for, because I think that we can leave that to like the defaults, like our subconscious, like they're just going to come and you sort of need to go out there and find them. But I want to hear more about your story, because you said when you started, there was no one that looked like you. So what was your journey to building your agency, and were there kind of mental blocks you had to overcome in terms of self-doubts and questioning whether you could do it?
Yeah, well, this is what's interesting. So it's funny when I say there was no one who looked like me, right? Your listener might be thinking, oh, she meant there were no black women doing what she was doing. No, there were like no entrepreneurs, right? Like in a way, being a teen entrepreneur. And I always remind people, I started in 1996. We didn't even know who Mark Zuckerberg was then.
Yeah.
Right? So there was not a frame of understanding this weird, right? Like people would apologize to my parents and say, I'm so sorry, Tina's so smart, she could have been a doctor or a lawyer, right? So there was not this like respect for entrepreneurship the way I think we really respect entrepreneurs and entrepreneurial, like we so respect the impact that great entrepreneurs have had on us, our world, our society, that didn't exist in 1996. And I remember probably around 2010, right? So this is 14 years now I've been in business, where I get invited into something called the Young Entrepreneurs Council. And it was the first time in my life I felt like I have my people.
Wow.
Right? We're all doing the thing, and it was literally like the moment of like, oh, there's a tribe, I'm included, there are people just like me, right? So it took me 14 years, right? That's a long time to find my
long. Sorry.
And still and that was 14 years of getting a lot of press, getting a lot of media, right? So I was getting a lot of external validation at the time of who I was. I mean, it took me 5 years after I had a cover story in O magazine to find my people, right? So I was still, I want to make that clear. I was very, very validated in my career. From the time I was like 18 years old, I was getting pressed, right? So the outside world was signaling, we love you and what you're doing, and I still hadn't found my people. And so that is why community is so important to me. I'm actually starting my own community called Founders Circle, where I want it to be like a cost that's affordable for founders to find community, be able to get advice from someone like me, where we can come in, ask questions, and be a community to each other. Because I also feel like we went through like a super community place, and now we're at another place of saying, okay, we all did the big communities, now what's really important to us again, right? It's a restating of values, and it's a way I feel like I can give back, because it was being in community that really saved me so many times as a founder, finding friend tours. And a friend tour is always important. I think mentors can be important. I think I like the idea of sponsors more than mentors, because mentors, it means like you and I are in a long-term relationship. What if we don't want a long-term relationship, right? A sponsor is like, you can do one really specific thing that can help me immensely right now. I need that, right? Or I think about people where I'm in their communities where they're like super, like 10 steps above where I am right now, and I get this much access to their time that really like saves me 10 steps, right?
Yeah.
Those communities are really exciting. But I think as a founder, you'll never not need to be as a community. I think as humans, we'll never not need community, right? I think we're very much designed to be in community. And to your point, your family of origin may not be the most supportive community for you. That's okay. We live in a time where we can find people who are interested. Like I was watching something the other day, and this woman was part of like a cookbook club that got together, and I was like, I need to join a cookbook club. I love that. I have a beautiful studio office. I can host a cookbook club. Like in my mind, I was like, yes, I need to join or make a cookbook club, right? And it's like, has nothing to do with work, but I'm like, that I just was watching it. And I was like, yes, that seems like something I should be into.
Yeah, I love that so much. And especially kind of when you broke down the different like people you seek in your community. So the friend tours, I've never heard that term before, but which I love. I want you to define it. Um, and then finding those mentors. I mean, for me, we're connected because Hala Taha introduced us. For me, finding those people has been always like so pivotal, but it's hard. It's not easy. It's not like you can just get someone who's 10 steps ahead of you to be your friend. It's
No,
so two
busy.
questions. One, what is a friend tour and how do you find mentors?
Yeah, so friend tours are literally as the word sounds. They're your friends, and you can mentor each other about certain things, right? There are people who are at the same life stage, and I think those people are so important. They're peers, right? Because they hold you accountable to your crap, right? Sometimes mentors are so far removed and they're busy and doing the thing that they get on the phone with you, and it's all inspo and all go get them. And like friend tours are like, what are you talking about? No. Absolutely not. You should be doing better here. You should be doing better. Right. There's an accountability. And I love friend tours where we're not in the same industry, right? But that they can help me with their industry. I can help them with my industry. And it's just this open communication and sharing. But there's something to having people who are in your life stage
Yeah.
that's just super important. And I think very validating in a community sense of like, I get you. I see you. I am where you are. And that to me is incredibly important. And then the second question, sorry, remind me of your second question.
Okay, my second question is how do you find mentors?
Yeah, so I'm not so big on finding mentors. So I'm not and the reason I say
Or
that,
sponsors. I think your
so
word is sponsors.
sponsors, yes, I love sponsors. And here's the thing to anyone who is seeking something from anyone else, period, do not send this person a 10 paragraph email. They do not have time. There's no time for that, right? Be very clear. And they open it and they're like, I got to get back to this later. I don't even know what this is. I have to get back to it later, right? Being really clear, really concise. Hi, saw you here. Love that, blah, blah, blah. Could you help me do this? I'd be so grateful, right? People love wins. I love a win. I love a quick win. I love being able to help someone know I can do it and know I can check it off the list, right? If I've got a 10 paragraph, I can't even check off reading the email off the list, even more to understand what the need is, right? I do believe in general, we want to be helpful. Anyone who has accomplished something or any of us that you look up to, like we're only here by the grace of other people helping us. So I want to be helpful, but I also need to be an incredibly good steward of my time. Right?
Yes.
And I can either spend 30 minutes to read and understand your request, not even knowing if I can do the thing, or I can spend that 30 minutes maybe helping 5 people do other things, right? And so you've got to think about it through that perspective. Make it easy for someone to help you.
Yeah.
Be really clear about what you're asking. And instead of asking someone for a long-term commitment of time over a series of months and years, say, hi, I saw you're on the board of X, Y, and Z. I'm really trying to get into, this conference. Could you help me? Right? Like it's just a quick there. And I found that like asking for help very strategically in very specific ways has really helped me in my career. Long emails and tons of attachments. It doesn't, we're dumping, right? We're just dumping stuff on someone else. We're not making it easier for them to help us.
This is such important advice, and mentorship or general support from community sponsors has helped me immensely. So I am a huge advocate for it. But something that I think a lot of people make a mistake with is asking not even just long things, but very broad questions. If you're asking like, how do I do X, Y, Z? And now you're staring at this being like, I need to like explain the whole process. Like someone who's busy is not going to do that. They're also not going to answer a question that you can Google. If
Yes.
you're asking like a yes, no question, like they just have to say yes. Like if you're saying, hey, I saw you had like Adam Grant on your podcast. Does he accept pitches? Like, I don't know, like something very specific. Or like, do you have his email address or something that would be like very quick for them to answer? I believe like there's also like a reciprocity. I don't know, there's a bias, there's a certain word, but once someone's engaged with you once, they may be more likely to engage with you in the future. So getting that very short, easy to answer question initially may mean that you can establish a relationship down the line, because they may respond to other things in the future. But yeah, make it as easy as possible.
Make it as smart as possible. Don't ask for someone's email address when you can just Google or do
Yeah.
a better investigator, right? And I also have a rule personally, where I make introductions that benefit both parties. And it's really important to me. Do not email me and say, can you connect me to some? The normal answer is no,
Yeah.
right? And I just don't send someone to someone, not checking with that person that they're interested. And that doesn't mean that, like, if we're in two different age levels or two different career levels, that the intro isn't warranted. There are tons of intros that are warranted, right? There are like younger people who are doing incredibly exciting, vibrant work where I'm like, wow, these two people getting to know each other is going to benefit both, right? So I do believe that that intergenerational play is really important. That intergenerational connection has been so critical to my career. I can't tell you how much I've called on girlfriends who are maybe a decade older and they've seen more in career and can really help me navigate, and they will call me and say, you're my young girlfriend. How do I do this? What makeup do I wear? I'm taking engagement photos, right? And so it's fun. It's really fun. And we're helping each other in ways that are just so, it feels light, right? And that's the feeling you want, is you want to feel additive. And I'm definitely not saying, oh, if you're younger, you're only taking. No, there's a way where it's a reciprocal or a reciprocated relationship. And yes, to your point, that's what you're looking for. But I have a rule that it's my ask three before me. I used to have a rule in my agency, because I really want, it was important to me to train people to work smarter, not harder. I always say I really don't care about hard work. I'm not moved by someone saying I worked really hard. I want you to work really smart, right? Because it's my personal philosophy that we own as much of our own time as possible. And if you dedicate even 10 minutes more to something that should not take that time, that's time away from you rejuvenating, doing the things you want to do, right? So if you're sitting there saying, I don't have time for recreation, well, how are you managing the time you have, right? Are you managing it correctly? And I found a lot of times, like, if you just retooled a few things, you'd have that extra time, right? So same for that other person. Don't ask someone to give you something that you could come up with on your own. Ask for the thing that's going to unlock the next step, because that's not the best use of their time. To answer something you could Google is not, right? Like, and let's use the Adam Grant example. The example is not to say, can you give me his email address? You can find, he's a professor. You can find that, right? The question would be, I see you're someone who was successful in getting him on your podcast. Can you tell me one thing that led to him being open to it, right? That's the key to unlock it. It's like the how. It's not just the what. We can find what all over the internet, right? And the key is in the thinking. And then you become that person that's like, wow, this person asked me a really smart question. I like how they think. I want to talk to that person, right? Not someone dumping their job on
Onto
you,
me.
someone they don't know, via email. Like, don't be that person.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I was thinking kind of along the lines of making it as simple as possible. I know I had someone reach out to me who's a podcaster, and she just asked how I got some of the guests that I have. So I just forward her the pitch that I'd sent to that particular guest that she was interested in, because that was very easy for me. It didn't take much for me to just click forward. And I know that I kind of stall on tasks, so sometimes I'll be like, oh, like I don't want to write this whole paragraph, but doing something like that, I'm very open to sharing like pictures and stuff with people in my community. Sorry,
I was going to say, you reminded me of something I used to do in the busiest part of my career when I was getting the most press, and day after day I was constantly getting emails for mentoring. What I did is I scripted an email. And the email basically said, I'm so sorry, I can't answer every email personally, and I'm not able to do what you're asking, but here's what I want to share with you. Here are my top 5 business books. Here are some clear tips, and everyone would get that. And I can't tell you the amount of people that would write me back and say, this was the most helpful thing you could have done for me, was give me this. And it was scripted. I had it. It was ready to go if I couldn't personally engage. And, it's a reminder to me that I kind of need to do that again.
It's awesome. Just take a more advanced guy. Kawasaki has an AI chat of himself that he sends where you can ask him stuff on AI, like, if there's anything you want to know, and then AI will come up with his answers in the various books and podcasts and stuff he's done.
Guy is
Um,
amazing. I've been interviewed by him. Of course, he would have that because that's just how amazing he is.
I actually looked at the interview you did with him. I know we're kind of nearing the end, so I want to quickly ask you a little bit about your professional rejections. First, I want to talk about your book publishing. What was your relationship with getting books out there into the world? Because you've written over a dozen books. Were
22
those
Yeah.
20? Oh my
22.
goodness. That's 22. I thought it was like 15 or something. Um, so those first book deals, what was your journey with getting your books written and published and out into the world?
Yeah, I'll talk about the first one. I was at the time, this was 2007. I had started doing some research with a client on this new emerging consumer called a tween. And I was just fascinated by tweens and what they were doing. And at the same time, I also had another client who I was representing a book, and it was a book for targeting teenagers from produced by a marketing company similar to mine. At the time, the editor, she was like, "Hey, you do the same thing this company does that we bought this book from. You should write a book." And I'm like, "I have no time for this," even though I had a degree in journalism, didn't have the time. So fast forward back to this focus group about tweens. A mom approached me and said, "Hey, what do you think I should do? My daughter's 10. She's reading Gossip Girl. I'm happy she's reading, but this isn't the most age appropriate content for her." And as most entrepreneurs will tell you, sometimes we hear of a problem and we really want to find a solution. And I thought, I love to write. I'm a marketer. I would love to write something healthy and good for girls. Let's try this. And I started writing Mackenzie Blue, and I called that editor and said, "Who are the top agents you buy from?" Found an agent that way, right? Asking the right question. Who are you purchasing books from, right? Not just like, who are agents you love. She could love an agent and hasn't bought a book from that person in years, right? They're just a lovely person. I wanted to know who was really selling the best books. And so I partnered with that agent. And that was really my first time in my career I'd had a lot of rejection, right? And my agent would say, "These are the loveliest rejection notes," right? Like, we'd love a Tina Wells series, not this one. And I even got it rejected at first by my publisher, Harper. And they thought it was too complicated. A 12-year-old girl who wants to be a singer or songwriter, do all these things. They were like, it's too complicated. And, my background is marketing, right? Packaging matters. Presentation matters. If I could really say anything to your audience, is like, that is what has propelled me in my career for almost 30 years, is always really presenting and wanting to be really clear about my visuals, my message. I really believe that good design, good quality design evokes emotion. People respond to that in a different way, right? They're not just responding from their head. And as happens with this proposal, I designed it to look like a 7th grade girl's composition book. So handwritten notes everywhere. It was a very, very cool book proposal. And so the same publisher rejected it. The actual publisher was in the editor's office one day who had rejected it. And she picked it up. And she said, "What is this? This is so cool." And she said, "It's this complicated thing, Mackenzie Blue. It's too complicated, too much going on. We passed." And the publisher said, "I'm interested. Bring her in. Let's ask her some questions." So I go in to meet with them, and they're like literally 16 people around a table, and me and my agent. And I spent about an hour and a half just answering their questions. Boom, boom, boom. Had an answer for everything. And my agent gets a call about 2 hours later, and she's like, "Almost fell out of my seat. They offered you a massive deal," and it's really, and that came from someone saying no first, right? It came from a
Yeah.
place of rejection. But what are my keys? One, presentation matters, right? I was really prepared for the assignment, and my proposal spoke for me when I was not in the room to speak for myself, right? It spoke for me enough to get me the audition, right? The second thing is, when I got the audition, I was prepared for it, right? Answering questions for an hour and a half is super tough, right? But people are choosing to make an investment or deciding if they're going to make an investment of their time, their talent, their resources into you. I needed to prove that I was worth time, talent, resources to make this book go, right? And the series, it wasn't just a book. They were committing to a 4-book series. And then I think the final thing is like, being really present and really showing up, right? So it's not just how I answered, it was how engaged. You could tell genuinely I loved what I was pitching, right? And that is how I feel about anything I'm doing at the moment. Is I am fully in love with what I am doing at that moment. And that people pick up on that. They pick up on that authenticity of you truly not, you're not just doing a thing, you're not just pitching the next thing. And in that moment in my life, and I still feel that way, right? 20 plus years later, I'm still writing for tween girls because I genuinely love writing for this age group, right? And you could sense that. And people want to be in partnership with that energy, with someone who is so passionate about what they're doing.
I love that so much. I think it's such a wonderful way to kind of close the conversation. And I wish we had more time to jump into kind of you writing for tween girls, because I feel like it's such a different thing to what you're doing in the other areas of your business. But really, what I take away from this, and I think it's just a great piece of advice for anyone listening, is that when someone says no to you, that doesn't mean necessarily that the product is, if you've accumulated a lot of rejections for a book, it doesn't necessarily mean that the product is bad, but it could mean that it needs to be repackaged. So it could mean that you need to change some things about the book. Maybe you need to go through another round of edits, kind of bring something to the forward that was down in the middle. And I think like thinking really strategically at your rejections is not just like a process of, oh, I got these rejections, I must keep sending it out and get more, and eventually it'll get accepted. But it can also be like, actually, maybe I need to change some things, repackage them, some things, tweak it, and like go back. And, I love the story that you got an acceptance from a previous rejection.
Well, and I think one point I want to make before we close is I wasn't wrong, right? I was ahead of the curve. I've spent so much of my career ahead of the curve. The tween I was seeing was in real life, right? I was doing research in focus groups, but culture, right, and marketing had yet to catch up to this new customer and who she was becoming, right? What I needed to do better was communicate my perspective and why, right? So the sell through was my ability to communicate why my perspective was correct, right? If you had only been used to a child, a girl as a child, and you didn't understand, no, there's this new emerging girl called a tween. She's in between being a teenager and a child. She's doing this and doing that. And when I really started to talk to you, what happens? People start to say, oh, I think my daughter's going through that, right? So it's a validation of a perspective. But if you hold a perspective and you can't validate and can't explain to someone why those are your values, then you really need to think about, are they your values, right? Because as founders, as entrepreneurs, we should be able to very clearly communicate our why.
Yeah. It's so fantastic. Thank you so much, Tina, and thank you so much for your time today.
It's so great to see you.
And yeah, we need to get our hands on some of those tween books. But if you're listening, you can also get a copy of The Elevation Approach and all of her books on Amazon and anywhere else. And I'm also giving away copies. So to a listener who subscribes, just email screenshots to media@hustlingwriters.com. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, take
This was My Rejection Story, hosted by me, Alice Draper. Thank you for listening to today's episode of My Rejection Story. I hope this conversation was as fun as I had recording it. I enjoy every episode. So just a reminder that you can win a copy of the book every single week. I do a giveaway of the author I interviewed. So if you love this conversation and you really want to grab your get your hands on a copy of the book, please enter the giveaway. All you have to do is subscribe and review the podcast and email me at media@hustlingwriters.com. And if you've already done it, you can do it from another app. And if you've already done it on all your apps, you could also just borrow a friend's phone, do it from a friend's phone, and let me know, like, on the screenshots that you did it on a friend's phone, because the more reviews and subscribes, the more likely I am to grow the show and make this podcast even bigger and better than it is, perhaps even get some funding, be able to invest money back in the show, and really just deliver on my promise to you, which is to make this as good as I can. So I just want to say a huge thank you quickly to my team, Christina Child, Samantha Dubé, and Chechofacho Ndabane. This show would not be here if it wasn't for them and their tireless work and belief in this mission. And then a huge thank you to the distribution partners. So there are some amazing people out here trying to get the word out to their networks, and also people that I think you will find extremely helpful, because if you want to write a book and get a book out there, these are experts in book writing and book publishing. So a couple of writing coaches who are highly recommended in my field: Emily Tameo Maher, Lindy Feel, Tracy Stewart, and Javasia Harris Bowler are all highly recommended writing coaches. And I know so many people who have used writing coach, and it's really helped them get the word out there and get the book out there and not just stay stuck in that draft phase. So their details are all in the show notes. And then also Nick Courtright is the CEO of a hybrid publishing house, which is an interesting way of publishing a book, and it's highly recommended. Many of my clients have gone through it with great success. You can find out all of Nick's details in the show notes as well. And if you have any questions about them or need their contact details because for some reason you can't find them, pop me an email. And thank you again for listening to the show. I'll see you next week for another conversation. And yeah, have a great Wednesday.